On the 40th floor, where power lives behind frosted glass, one ordinary man is about to make a mistake that will
Sorry, I am so sorry.
In an instant, a maintenance worker.
For a man raising a daughter alone on a maintenance man's wage, one wrong step could cost him everything he has left. She could have ended his career on the spot. Instead, she did something no one.
Daniel Hayes had exactly $11 in his checking account and a work order for a broken thermostat on the 40th floor. And by the end of that day, both of those facts would feel like they belonged to someone else's life. If you have ever felt invisible in a room full of powerful people, if you have ever worried that one small mistake could cost you everything you've built for the people you love, stay with this story until the end. And if it moves you even a little, hit like and subscribe, because stories like this one deserve to be shared. Daniel had been a facilities technician at Whitfield Dynamics for almost 3 years, ever since his wife passed and left him alone to raise their daughter, Maya, who was 7 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, and the entire reason he got out of bed every single morning. He worked the early shift so he could pick her up from school by 4, and he worked the late shift twice a week so he could afford her asthma medication. He was not a man who dreamed of much anymore. He dreamed of Maya laughing. He dreamed of a car that didn't stall in the rain. He dreamed of never again having to choose between groceries and rent. That Tuesday afternoon, a work order landed on his cart for the executive suite on the top floor. A broken thermostat, marked urgent, signed off by building security as cleared for entry. Daniel had been up there only a handful of times before. The executive floor felt like a different planet entirely, all marble and glass and hushed voices, nothing like the boiler room and loading dock where he spent most of his days. He knocked twice on the CEO's door, heard nothing, and pushed it open exactly as his work order instructed him to. He did not expect to find Elena Whitfield standing there, mid-change after a spilled coffee incident before an investor call, her blazer draped over the back of her chair. The moment lasted less than 3 seconds. He spun around so fast he nearly knocked over a filing cabinet, stammering apologies with his back turned, his ears burning red, his heart slamming against his ribs. Elena, for her part, gasped, grabbed her blazer and ordered him out in a voice sharp enough to cut glass. Daniel didn't wait to be told twice. He was out in the hallway within seconds, sliding down against the wall, his hands shaking. He had heard the stories about Elena Whitfield, brilliant, relentless, unforgiving to anyone who wasted her time or crossed a line. He had seen 2 other employees let go for far smaller offenses. All he could think about, sitting there in that cold marble hallway, was Maya's face, and what he would tell her if he lost this job. He thought about rent. He thought about her inhaler. He thought about how quickly a good life could unravel over something that was, technically, not even his fault. For 3 days, nothing happened. No call to HR, no security escort to clear out his locker, just silence, which somehow felt worse. Daniel kept his head down, worked twice as hard, avoided the top floor entirely, and prayed that whatever storm was coming would simply pass him by. But on the 4th day, he was called up to the executive floor again, this time by name, this time with an explicit request from Elena Whitfield herself. He walked into her office expecting termination papers. Instead, he found her standing by the window, arms crossed, studying the skyline instead of him. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even mention the incident directly. She asked him plainly how long he had worked in the building, whether he liked the job, and what he wanted out of his life if money were not a concern. Daniel, caught completely off guard, answered honestly. He wanted stability for his daughter. He wanted to finish the electrical certification he'd started years ago before his wife got sick. And he wanted, more than anything, to stop feeling like life was something that happened to him instead of something he had a hand in shaping. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she told him something that surprised him more than anything that had happened 4 days earlier. She said that in 11 years of building her company, she had grown so used to people flattering her, fearing her, or trying to use her that she had almost forgotten what it looked like when someone was simply, uncomfortably, honestly human. His panic in that doorway, his instinct to protect her privacy rather than gawk or gossip, had told her more about his character in 3 seconds than most of her senior staff had shown her in years. She did not fire him. She did something far stranger. She offered to sponsor the rest of his electrical certification program through the company's professional development fund. On one condition, he had to actually finish it this time, no excuses. Daniel, stunned, agreed before he even fully processed what was happening. What followed over the next several weeks was not a fairy tale rescue, but something slower and more real. Daniel enrolled in night classes twice a week, arranging carpool pickups for Maya with a neighbor. He was exhausted in a new way now, the good kind of tired that comes from building something instead of just surviving it. Elena, meanwhile, began stopping by the facilities office more often than her schedule strictly required. First with genuine follow-up questions about his coursework, then, gradually, with conversations that had nothing to do with work at all. She asked about Maya. She remembered the following week that Maya's school play was that Friday. Small things, human things. Of course, nothing good in Daniel's life had ever come without a complication, and this was no exception. Word began to spread through the office that the CEO was spending unusual amounts of time with a maintenance worker, and office gossip has never once in the history of workplaces been kind or accurate. A senior executive named Richard Colton, who had been quietly maneuvering for a larger role in the company and saw Elena's unconventional attention to Daniel as an opportunity, began suggesting to the board that Elena's judgment was being compromised by a personal relationship with a subordinate employee, implying favoritism, implying scandal, implying that Daniel's continued employment, let alone his tuition sponsorship, was evidence of impropriety that could embarrass the company publicly. The board called an emergency meeting. Daniel, informed by a friend in HR that his name had come up in a closed-door session about conflicts of interest, felt the old fear roar back to life. He thought about walking away entirely, quitting before he could be fired, sparing Elena the political headache his presence seemed to be causing her. He very nearly did exactly that, drafting a resignation letter at his kitchen table while Maya slept in the next room, telling himself it was the responsible thing to do, the thing that protected his daughter from more uncertainty. But something in him, the same instinct that had made him turn his back and apologize in that office days earlier instead of doing anything else, told him that running from the truth had never once solved anything in his life. Instead of resigning, he requested to speak at the board meeting himself. It was, by his own admission afterward, the most terrifying 5 minutes of his life. He stood in a conference room full of executives in tailored suits, in his same Navy uniform, and told them plainly what had actually happened. The accidental entry, his immediate exit, Elena's decision afterward to invest in his education not as favoritism, but as the kind of opportunity any company should be proud to offer a hardworking employee. He told them about Maya. He told them about the inhaler and the electrical certification and the 3 years he'd spent trying to build something stable out of very little. He did not ask for sympathy. He asked only that they judge the facts, not the rumors. Elena, watching from across the table, said nothing during his statement, but her expression, steady, unreadable to everyone but him by then, told Daniel everything he needed to know. When the board voted, it was not close. Richard Colton's narrative collapsed under the simple weight of an honest account, and within a month, his own conduct, including several undisclosed conflicts of his own, came under separate review, ultimately leading to his quiet departure from the company entirely. Daniel finished his certification 8 months later at the top of his class. Whitfield Dynamics, expanding its internal facilities and infrastructure division, created a new supervisory electrical role. One Daniel was, by every objective measure, the most qualified internal candidate to fill. He took it not because Elena handed it to him, but because he had genuinely earned it, a distinction that mattered enormously to him and, it turned out, to her as well. What grew between Daniel and Elena in the months that followed was slow and unhurried, built more on Friday dinners and shared exhaustion after long days than any dramatic declaration. Maya, for her part, adored Elena almost immediately, in the uncomplicated way children do when someone simply shows up, again and again, and means it. There was no single moment where everything was suddenly perfect, just a gradual accumulation of ordinary evenings that Daniel had once been too afraid to imagine for himself. 2 years after a single accidental knock on the wrong door, Daniel Hayes stood in a modest backyard, tie slightly crooked, watching his daughter walk down a short aisle of folding chairs scattering flower petals before he married the woman who had once ordered him out of her office in a voice sharp enough to cut glass. He often thought, in the quiet moments afterward, about how close he had come to quitting before the board meeting, about how easily fear could have convinced him to walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to his family. The lesson he carried forward, and the one he tried hardest to teach Maya, was simple. The worst moments of your life do not have to define you, and sometimes the door you are most afraid to open is the one that changes everything for the better.